Today we talk about something big happening in Africa, something that could change the balance of power across the Sahel. In August 2025, in the quiet dawn of Ouagadougou, the capital of Burkina Faso, people heard the low, grinding sound of metal, not construction, not traffic, but armored vehicles, dozens of them, rolling through the city under heavy military escort. These were not French, not American, not old or second-hand. They were brand new, and they came from China. Chinese military trucks, tanks, and rocket launchers now line the roads of West Africa for the first time. A poor and war-torn country like Burkina Faso has access to long-range guided missiles, mobile artillery, and six-wheeled assault carriers, the kind of weapons that can turn a scattered army into a modern fighting force, the kind of power that makes insurgents think twice. But what does this really mean? Why is China arming one of Africa's most unstable regions? And why now? Before we go deeper. If you believe stories like this matter, stories about dignity, defense, and decisions made far from headlines, please subscribe to this channel, and in the comments, tell us, do you think Africa should choose its own partners, even if that means turning east, for years? Burkina Faso struggled to defend itself. It lost thousands of lives to terrorist attacks. Entire villages disappeared. France once promised protection. The United States offered advice. But when things got worse, the weapons didn't come, the troops left, and the people waited. Now, with a single arms deal, the story may be changing. This isn't just about Burkina Faso. It's about who gets to lead in Africa, who steps in when others walk away. And it's about a man named Captain Ibrahim Traoré, the 36-year-old leader of this landlocked nation, who said no to old masters and yes to a different kind of power. So stay with us, because what rolled through Ouagadougou this August was more than metal. It was a message, and that message could change the future of the continent. In early August 2025, something unusual happened in Burkina Faso, along a dusty military highway outside Ouagadougou. Ordinary civilians gathered on the roadside. They weren't waving flags or chanting. They were watching, silent, curious, as dozens of armored trucks rolled past. The lead vehicle was marked with fresh paint. Its shape, sleek, angular, reinforced, was unmistakably Chinese. Behind it came more. Long flatbeds carried rocket launchers. Some vehicles bore large mobile cannons. Others towed radar units, spare parts, and crates marked military use only. This was the most visible foreign arms delivery in the country's history. It wasn't a secret. It wasn't disguised. It was a message, one painted in steel, in camouflage, and in quiet defiance. Burkina Faso had just received a full package of advanced Chinese-made military hardware. Among them, the VN-22B, a six-wheeled armored fire support vehicle. The PLS-05, a self-propelled hybrid mortar and cannon, and the SR-5, a long-range modular rocket launcher system capable of precision, strikes up to 70 kilometers away. For the average person, these names may mean little, but on the battlefield, they can mean everything. Let's start with the VN-22B. It's not a tank, but it's close. This armored carrier can move fast, absorb direct hits, and fire on the move. Its cannon is stabilized, meaning it can track and hit targets even while bouncing across rough terrain. For a military long forced to travel in unarmored pickup trucks, this is a leap forward. Until now. Ambushes on the road were deadly. Militants used motorcycles and old rifles to surprise lightly armed patrols. Soldiers often couldn't respond quickly or safely. With the VN-22B, that changes. Troops can push forward under protection and fire back with precision. Next, the PLS-05. Think of it as two weapons in one. It can lob artillery shells from behind cover like a traditional mortar, but it can also roll forward and fire directly into a hostile position like a field cannon. That matters in the Sahel, where insurgents don't fight in open fields. They hide in tree lines, in villages, behind mud walls to fight back. You need flexibility and speed. This vehicle offers both. And then, there's the SR-5, a modular rocket system that can launch guided or unguided rockets over long distances. These aren't the crude rockets used by militias. These are battlefield tools capable of hitting targets with surprising accuracy. That means insurgent bases, ammo dumps, and training camps, once safe because they were far, are now within reach. This isn't the first time China has sold weapons to African countries, but it is the first time Burkina Faso has received this scale and type of delivery. Prior shipments included mine-resistant vehicles and personnel carriers. But this package was different, bigger, more advanced, and very public. Why now? Because the old security system failed. For years. France was the dominant military power in the region. Their troops trained African forces, ran patrols, and claimed to keep the peace. But terrorism kept spreading. Attacks got worse. Burkina Faso lost control of almost half its territory, and people began asking hard questions. Why were French troops still here if things kept getting worse? In 2022 and 2023, the protests grew. Crowds chanted against neo-colonialism. They demanded self-defense, not dependency, eventually. France withdrew. The United States remained. Drones, advisors, intel, but no serious firepower. And when Burkina Faso asked for more, Washington offered reports and conditions, not weapons. So they turned to Beijing. China responded with speed and scale. No lectures about elections, no delays over paperwork, just steel, vehicles, and logistics. The deal wasn't free, but it was clear. Most analysts believe the weapons are financed through deferred payments and future gold exports. That's a risk, but for the government in Ouagadougou, the bigger risk was waiting, because soldiers were dying, villages were falling, and morale was low for the Burkinabè military. This shipment wasn't just hardware, it was hope. Hope that they could finally defend their land. Hope that patrols wouldn't always be suicide missions. Hope that maybe, just maybe, they could turn the tide. But new weapons are only tools. They need training, coordination, maintenance, and they must be used wisely. If not, they become trophies, shiny, expensive, and useless. Beijing seems to know this. Reports suggest Chinese trainers and engineers are already on the ground, not in uniform, but in control rooms, on test ranges, teaching quietly. That too is part of the message. China isn't just selling, it's investing. So now the battlefield looks different. Soldiers in Burkina Faso have firepower they've never had. The question is, what comes next? Because the weapons are here, the war is ongoing, and the world is watching. When the weapons arrived, it wasn't just the sound of engines that filled the air. It was a shift in emotion. A soldier near the northern town of Djibo told a reporter, "For the first time, I feel we have a chance." He didn't mention China. He didn't talk politics. He just looked at the armored vehicle parked beside him and said, "Now, we can fight back." That feeling, simple but powerful, is part of why this delivery matters. For years, troops in Burkina Faso were outgunned and outmaneuvered. Many patrols had no protection. Units were ambushed on open roads. Militants moved fast and disappeared just as quickly. Even when the army responded, their outdated equipment often broke down, misfired, or simply couldn't keep up. The cost was human. By 2024, nearly 2 million people were displaced. Families fled the countryside. Schools closed. Hospitals shut down. Local leaders were killed. The state itself began to retreat. So when convoys of advanced armor rolled into Ouagadougou in August 2025, the moment was more than military. It was emotional. It told the country, Help has arrived. It told soldiers, "You are not forgotten," inside military bases. The mood changed. Commanders no longer had to choose between sending units with no backup or canceling missions altogether. They could plan real operations, real offense. That kind of shift restores discipline, restores pride, and perhaps most important, it restores faith. In a conflict like this, morale matters as much as bullets. And yet, the delivery also raised new questions. What message does this send to the region, to neighboring countries? It was a wake-up call in Mali, where the army has relied on Russian Wagner contractors. Leaders saw in Burkina Faso a kindred shift away from Paris, toward new partners in Niger, where a political crisis disrupted ties with France and the US. The Chinese model now looks more attractive. No strings, fast delivery, flexible terms, to many across the Sahel. The weapons symbolized something bigger than war. They represented sovereignty, the power to choose, the freedom to act without waiting for Western approval. But to the West, the message was different. In Paris and Washington, alarm bells rang quietly, not because of the firepower itself, but because of what it revealed, that years of investment, training, and influence had failed to secure long-term trust. France once had over 5,000 troops in the Sahel. Today, it has fewer than 500. The U.S. still operates drone bases in Niger, but its political leverage is shrinking. When countries like Burkina Faso feel abandoned, they look elsewhere. And now, that elsewhere is Beijing. China's goal here is not simply arms sales, it's presence, influence, long-term relationships. By embedding training teams and offering maintenance support, Beijing ensures that Burkina Faso becomes reliant, not just today, but for years. Spare parts, upgrades, replacements, all will come from China. That's not just a deal, that's a strategic foothold. At the same time, Beijing wins in other ways. Every successful operation using Chinese weapons becomes a silent advertisement. Every soldier who returns from battle alive, thanks to a VN-22B, becomes a quiet advocate. This is how China grows its role in Africa, not with headlines, but with hardware. Still, many observers warn, firepower alone does not win this kind of war. The root causes of the insurgency, poverty, marginalization, lack of services, remain. New vehicles can protect a patrol, but they can't rebuild a burned village. Guided rockets can destroy a training camp, but they can't replace lost trust between the people and their government. That's the real challenge for Captain Ibrahim Traoré, as the youngest head of state in West Africa. He has promised a new path, a path based on sovereignty, dignity, and security. This weapons deal is part of that promise, but it's only the beginning. If the army uses this new strength to restore order, protect civilians, and reclaim territory, he will gain legitimacy. But if it is used recklessly, or without community support, the insurgency could grow even stronger, in a way. This moment is a test, not just for Burkina Faso, but for a new model of African defense, one that does not rely on former colonial powers, one that makes space for new partners, new strategies. So as these machines move into position, the next phase of the conflict begins. It won't be decided by weapons alone, but it will be shaped by what they allow, by how leaders use them, and how the people respond. The battlefield has changed, but the war for the Sahel's future is far from over. When soldiers gain new weapons, the battlefield changes. But what about the lives of those they're meant to protect? In Burkina Faso, the answer is unfolding in real time. The new armored vehicles may not be visible in every village, but their impact reaches far beyond military bases. In towns once threatened weakly by militants, a cautious sense of safety is returning. Farmers in the central north report fewer attacks on market roads. Local officials are holding meetings again in areas where government had vanished. And some families, after years of displacement, are considering going home. But rebuilding a sense of safety takes more than firepower. It takes services, clean water, working schools, local clinics. These are still missing in many places. And while the weapons allow soldiers to protect more ground, they cannot fix what war has broken. For Captain Ibrahim Traoré, this is the challenge. His government is now expected to do more, restore order, support communities, and lead with vision. The weapons bought him time, but time is not the same as trust, domestically. The arms deal gave his administration a surge of legitimacy on national television. Images of the Chinese vehicles played for days. News anchors praised the new capabilities. Army officers held press conferences, and on social media. Government supporters celebrated a new era. But opposition figures were more cautious. Some asked, "How are we paying for all this? Where will the money come from?" Burkina Faso ranks among the world's poorest countries. Its GDP per capita is under $900. Unemployment is high. Over 40% of the population lives in poverty. So when people see convoys of expensive, foreign-made military hardware, the question is natural: how did we afford it? The answer lies in the structure of the deal. China does not require upfront cash like Western suppliers often do. Instead, it offers what analysts call resource-backed credit. In simple terms, that means future gold exports. Burkina Faso is one of Africa's top gold producers. It has dozens of active mining sites and earns most of its foreign currency through gold. Under this deal, experts believe the government pledged a portion of future gold revenues to repay China. That means the bill is not paid today, but over the next decade or more, in some cases. China also provides concessional loans. These have low interest rates, long repayment periods, and limited penalties for Beijing. The real value isn't in profit. It's in building long-term dependency. Once a country like Burkina Faso uses Chinese vehicles and systems, it needs Chinese parts. It needs Chinese training. Switching suppliers becomes costly, sometimes impossible. That's the quiet logic of the deal, and it's not new. China used the same model in Angola, where oil was used as collateral for infrastructure, in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Copper and cobalt were used to pay for roads and hospitals. Now, in Burkina Faso, it's gold for guns. Supporters of the deal say it's a fair exchange. The government gets what it needs to survive now. The cost is spread out, and unlike Western aid, there are no political conditions, but critics see danger. They fear that future governments will be tied to this debt. That in 10 years, when the conflict may be over. Burkina Faso could find its key export locked into rigid contracts. There's also concern about sovereignty. What happens if the country falls behind on payments? Could China gain control over mines, over land? Could this partnership come with quiet strings? So far, the government insists the terms are balanced, but the full contracts have not been made public. For ordinary people, the concerns are simpler. They want peace. They want to return home. They want their children to go to school without fear. If the weapons help deliver that, the political cost may seem worth it. But if security does not improve, if the insurgents adapt, then the government may face even more pressure. Because this time, the people saw the investment. They saw the trucks roll in. They expect results, and that brings us back to leadership. Traoré's message has been clear. Burkina Faso will defend itself on its own terms. The Chinese arms deal was a bold step toward that goal. But bold steps come with responsibility. The burden is no longer just fighting. It's delivering. On safety, on dignity, on hope. Whether this moment becomes a turning point or just another chapter in a long war will depend on how that burden is carried. To the average viewer in the United States, a Chinese weapons shipment in West Africa may seem distant, but in Washington, this event is part of a larger pattern and a growing concern. For decades, the Sahel was seen as a Western security zone. France led the charge with troops and air support. The U.S. provided intelligence, surveillance, and training. Billions were spent. But the results were mixed. Terror groups expanded, public trust eroded, and Western credibility weakened. Now, countries like Burkina Faso are changing direction. For American analysts, the shift is strategic. When African states turn to China, or to Russia in the case of Mali, they're not just choosing suppliers. They're choosing systems of finance, diplomacy, and security that don't rely on Western terms. Beijing's approach is simple: no political lectures, fast delivery, long-term influence, and that model is spreading. From Niger exploring Turkish drones to Mali embracing Russian fighters. A new bloc is forming, post-Western and increasingly independent in this light. The Chinese deal with Burkina Faso is more than arms. It's a symbol of transition, a quiet vote of no confidence in the old order. What does this mean for the United States? First, it signals a loss of leverage. When partners stop asking for American support, U.S. influence shrinks. Second, it raises security questions. China's growing military ties in Africa could eventually lead to intelligence sharing, military bases, or exclusive access to resources. And third, it forces a policy rethink. Should Washington re-engage with the region, or accept that its role is no longer central? Some American lawmakers call for a stronger response, more support, more visibility. Others urge restraint, arguing that African nations should shape their own future. Meanwhile, in Beijing, the message is clear. Where the West steps back, China moves in, and for Burkina Faso, the consequences are already real. The U.S. may still watch from afar, but it's China that now shapes the battlefield. So now the weapons are here, the vehicles are deployed, the rockets are ready, and Burkina Faso stands at a crossroads, not just in its war, but in its identity. Will this new firepower bring lasting security, or will it draw the country deeper into another form of dependency? Captain Ibrahim Traoré has framed this as a moment of sovereignty, a rejection of old patterns, a chance to defend his people without waiting for Western permission. Many of his citizens agree. They see the Chinese deal not as surrender, but as survival. But sovereignty is not just about choosing partners. It's about results. If these weapons help reclaim territory, restore services, and protect the vulnerable, Traoré may be remembered as the leader who defied the odds. If they fail, or if corruption and poor planning undermine the mission, the backlash could be severe. For the Sahel, this is bigger than one country. Other nations are watching. If Burkina Faso succeeds with Chinese arms, others may follow. A quiet shift could become a regional wave, but success requires more than strength. It requires justice, rebuilding, trust. No missile can substitute for honest governance. No armored vehicle can erase the roots of fear. And so we ask, is this the beginning of a new era, or just a different face of an old struggle? If this story reminds you of your own family's memories of war, of rebuilding, or of quiet courage, share them in the comments if you're praying for peace in the Sahel. Speak a name out loud tonight. If you believe Africans have the right to shape their future on their terms, send this story to someone who honors dignity. And if you want to follow what happens next, to see whether Captain Traoré's gamble pays off, subscribe to this channel. We'll be here, every step of the way, because the convoys may have arrived, but the real test is just beginning.